Welcome to Beyond the Lair. Today we speak to Stephen Stark, President and CEO of Tsawwassen Shuttles Inc. We have a heartfelt discussion with Steve about how challenges from the past can lead to strength and perseverance for business in the future. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Lair, the podcast. I am your co-host, Gina Jackson Montgomery.
And I'm Dean Montgomery.
And we are absolutely thrilled and honored today to have the great Stephen Stark here. Stephen is a proud member of the Tsawwassen First Nation and is also the president and CEO of Tsawwassen Shuttles Inc, but also an incredible human being. We have a connection. We've seen each other at many, many events because I don't think that there's a better networker than you, Steve. But also you are one of our stars and one of our contestants on the Bears Lair Season 2. So thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. The honor is actually mine. So I appreciate to be amongst you guys as well.
So honored to have you. When we talk to our guests, it's not just an interview. It's obviously a very intimate conversation. And what we like to tell our viewers and also our listeners is to give a little glimpse into who Steve Stark is, how you became yourself, how you grew up from humble beginnings, any kind of stories that you would like to tell us, who you are now and where you're going. So first and foremost, in chronological order, who's Steve Stark? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? And tell us a little bit about you and your upbringing.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, my ancestral name is Tsawwassen, and we come from the Salmon people facing the sea, which is also known as Tsawwassen First Nation. I never grew up there. Honestly, I was only introduced to Tsawwassen First Nation at the age of 15. And that's when I met my biological father. Before that, I grew up, I was born in Chilliwack and didn't live there for very long. My mom and my biological father separated at a young age due to intergenerational abuse and, all that trickle-down effect that has happened through residential school and the 60 scoops for my biological father, which unfortunately he wasn't able to be a good man at that time in his life. And so, my mom found somebody else that she moved on with the rest of her life. And that was my stepdad, Len. He was a gold miner. We moved all across North America chasing, not doing like pan golding, but he was what I call an expert and a professional mining and blaster and open pit. And he was a non-union worker. And so when union companies shut down, they would call in specialists like him to keep the mines going, basically keep the shareholders' lights on and keep gold rolling or copper or minerals of whatever it may be. And so I moved all across North America in a short period of time in my life. Unfortunately, it's a bit hard to be uprooted every couple times a year, once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year. And then going undiagnosed of hearing problems when I was born. I was born legally deaf. I could still hear, but not to the point where they wouldn't say that I wasn't legally deaf. So I had to do surgery at the age of 9 years old, which they rebuilt my eardrums. And then I had a series of surgeries after that, and then ongoing tubes for the rest of my upraising until I was about 25 years old. So 14 sets of tubes and 3-year surgeries for reconstructive eardrum. And then, to go back in today's knowing a little bit more about my history and my biological and what my mom had to go through, we suspect now that I actually wasn't born legally deaf, but it was more ear damage from the abuse as a child from him. And so that's the reasons why my mom had to leave him pretty quick. Because he was not very friendly to us kids growing up at such a small age. And I moved to Arizona, and from there I went to high school, Siloam in Wickenburg, and then at the age of 15 I left home back to Vancouver, and then I met my biological father. And so there's a big story in between there of abuse and trauma and traumatic things that have happened to me, and then living on the streets from the age of 15 till I was 26. But I didn't fully live on the street all the time. My brother took care of me and always gave me a safe place and had a couch to go to. He was 4 years older than me. He's a great man, Jeremy, also known as Jerome. He lives in Penticton. My other brother is Ron. He lives in North Dakota. And so I'm the baby of the family, but I'm the best looking one too. And the tallest as well. So
I hope they're listening.
I got all the best qualities out of the family.
Excellent. The lion's share, as we like to call it. The lion's share.
I know you'll be texting this podcast to them, right? First thing.
Any chance I get to rub it in their face, I do.
Exactly. And also Vancouver's most eligible bachelor, I believe, as well. So excellent. Excellent. Well, tell us a little bit. So when you mentioned living on the street, my brother, Shane Jackson, had his, who's now a recovering lawyer and a great businessman, also had his times when he was younger as well. And that tumultuous childhood. Why don't you explain to our viewers what that means when you live on the street? Mm-hmm. Because going down East Hastings and what have you, when people say that they live on the street, they really see the worst of the worst. And maybe tell us a little bit, give us a little glimpse into what that was like and how you felt safe down there.
Yeah, well, I was originally living in Penticton, and one of my really good friends, Richard Fred McBratney, already moved to Calgary, and he said, hey, there's lots of work up here, it's time to get a change. And, I wasn't doing very well in Penticton. Penticton's a bit of a hard place to, as a young kid looking for trouble. There's a lot of drugs and activities and drinking, and it's more of a party town, young town. And so it was time for me to kind of flap my wings, and took a Greyhound and ended up in Calgary. And he said, look, you can live with me. I just need you to wait at this place, and then I'll pick you up at the end of my day. And I was like, okay. I got 3 bags, a duffel bag, 2 suitcases, and I ended up sitting at a drop-in center. And I sat there, and that was the first time I was introduced to such an environment like that. And so obviously anxiety and worry and, trying to figure out the landscape of who's in the zoo, in the drop-in center. And it was a brand new facility. I think there probably had to be about 250 people in the cafeteria at that time. And it was just a beehive of activity and just kind of watching and learning throughout that day and waiting for Rick to get there. And then when he got there, he said, look, I'm sorry, but you can't stay with me. You're going to have to stay here. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? And he's like, well, my roommate won't let me bring you into the house. And then, you know what? It just quickly evolved into, he ended up moving into the drop-in center a week later. A few more friends from Penticton. We made a few more friends on the streets in Calgary. And it became, it's, when you got no place to go and you get used to your environment real quick, right? You understand the landscape, and it's like, while living on the streets, there is a lot of resources for youth, kids, and women and children and men. There's a lot of programs and services available if you know how to maximize those opportunities. And there was the Mustard Seed, Salvation Army, the Drop-In Center. And there was a lot of foods and clothing throughout the day. And, obviously Calgary is not a friendly place of environment for the weather. During the off season, winter can get down to minus 30, 40 plus. And the thing about these drop-in centers, it's basically at 11 o'clock, the door closes, right? So you can either get back in by 11 or you're going to have to sleep on the street. And sometimes you already know that you're not going to be back by 11, so you hide your sleeping bag somewhere so you can grab it and then find a place underneath an overpass. Or I had a mummy bag, and some people didn't. But then you become real creative about during the winter time where you are going to sleep. And so a lot of hotels downtown have pools and hot tubs as well, like the YMCA, and they expel hot air all the time. And so you find these areas where the air is coming out of the building, and you can sleep nice and cozy for the rest of the night and wait for the morning to come. But, you do come complacent. You come complacent and accept your environment. I was working on and off and lived on the streets, and, no bills, no responsibilities, free food. And, it was just kind of like, this is, did a lot of drinking, a lot of partying with a lot of people, met a lot of people. And you know what? I don't have any regrets. I think those life experiences have given me the tools to really map out people in general and understand how business works, because trauma doesn't necessarily just have to be debilitating, right? Trauma from your past can give you the tools to figure out how's that person looking at me? What is their tone? How are they acting in the meeting? You know, like how are they, like, there's ways to evaluate situations real quickly as a child that comes from trauma right from the very beginning. And so my stepdad wasn't so nice. So, you know, when that door opened up, is it an open door? Is it a slam door? How's he stomping his feet? Like, you know, are you going to get a licking today? Right? How's the table? You know, how the food being served? Like, what's the tone in his voice? And so, really, those have been giving me a lot of tools to walk into a room in a board meeting or an open event and really figure out like who's who in the zoo and really connect with people on a real personal level, because I'm very, very connected by passion and rooted by figuring out who people are inside, not just necessarily like the surface stuff. So right away when I meet somebody, I'm digging, right? I'm digging like, give me some stuff, and I'll open up as well and share my story just to see if I can help.
Yeah, and I'd imagine as well is that, you know, you must be thinking sometimes in a in a business situation is, you know, like, what's the worst that can happen, right? Right. I'm completely happy, and I know what makes me happy. I don't think that. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I've worked in hospitality. Dina's worked in hospitality and customer service, and you really do find, I think that's the best education, to be in any way, shape, or form around people. And coming from a trauma-filled childhood as well, you are assessing, you're ultra sensitive, uber sensitive to your surroundings and what's going around you. And I do believe that it affects you in business, and that it's a positive thing in business. How long were you on the street for, and what was the shift in you getting off the street and turning your life around?
Good question. Well, I ended up with a one-way bus ticket from Denver, Colorado to downtown Vancouver. And the day that my mom and my stepdad kicked me out, I went to go say goodbye to my mom that morning, and she said, she just kept her back towards me. And, you know, I was a troubled kid. They have their own reasons as to they feel justified why I needed to leave the house. And I feel a little bit different in their opinion, but, you know, it was a sad day. And I ended up being on my own ever since. And, you know, I've had some people like my brother and other relatives give me a safe place to stay from time to time. But, you know, kind of couch surfing and hopping and, you know, door to door. And then it was full time from 2000 to 2004 and staying on the streets in Calgary. And then there was a shift, like any good thing, you burn your bridges after a while, and you know, you got to go. And I decided to come back to Tsawwassen First Nation. You know, I think it's really important when I was 15 years old and I got the boot. I was living with my brother Jeremy at the time in OK Falls, and I got a call from my grandmother on my mom's side. She said, "Look, here's your biological's phone number if you want to get to know him." And never knew him growing up, very little knowledge of him other than what my mom did explain about who he was and the things he did. And so it didn't paint a real pretty picture, but as a young man, displaced, no father figure, striving to have some connection with somebody, I was like, you know what, I want to find out for myself. I picked up that phone, I called him right away, and he answered, and 2 days later I met him in person, and then a month later I decided to move to Tsawwassen First Nation. And, you know, I always, as a child, you always want to be by your parents, right? Like, you just want to know them and understand who they are, and then I found out I was from Tsawwassen First Nation as well. And
you didn't know until then? I
did not know.
Wow. Did your dad turn his life around?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
Yeah, he's still stuck in a perpetual circle of addiction. And it's quite sad as well. But, you know, I think also understanding what has happened to our Indigenous people, to him and to my grandmother and so on and so on. And so as I age a little bit more, I have a little bit more compassion, understanding, and patience around some of these tough topics about intergenerational trauma and abuse that he has also had subjected to him. Yeah, I think I was living with him for less than 3 weeks, and he was already stuck a crack pipe in my mouth and taught me how to smoke it and clean it and sell it, and, you know, introduced that into my life. And him and I were under addictions together on and off for 10 years while I was at Tsawwassen, and then I'd go back to Calgary, I'd go to Penticton, and I'd drift back and forth from TFN and go throughout BC. And then it was in 2004. I was 24 years old and went back to Tsawwassen First Nation, and it was my brother Ron. He bought me a plane ticket, and he said, "This is the last time I'm going to help you." You know, because the family afterwards, we burn our bridges with family, and they get tired of it, and you know, they don't want to support it anymore. And he was at his wit's end, and you know, if you're not going to do it this time, Steve, I'm not going to help you. He said, and I said, okay. There was a moment there that when I came back to TFN, that I accepted my fate as an addict. I was already full-fledged into daily addiction. I would go to work, make enough money to get $60 or $50, and I would go back to this house that I was living at, and I would smoke my crack or drink my beer, and I just kept doing it daily. And I found solace in understanding that this is who I am. Like, I didn't have a big education. You know, I was in full addiction, underweight, didn't have any parents, and you know, a bit lonely. And I said, okay, this is you're probably going to die an addict. And it was a hard moment to understand and face that and be acceptance to that as who I am. And so I still remember those moments. And then close to the end of the addiction, it was like the light bulb went off. I started getting little.
How many years was that, Steve?
Well, from 15 till 26, so 11 years, right? And I went hard for 2004 to 2006. It was every single day. Yeah.
And what changed?
Like, did you go to rehab?
When did you? How did you get out of this?
Well, I was so stuck in my addiction of this cycle that I was in. And it was like one day, I think it was like 2 months before I went to my first meeting, the light bulb went off. And it didn't actually just necessarily just like all of a sudden I seen a path. It was like, I think I have a problem. Like these little seeds in my mind of like, there's got to be something more for me out there. There's got to be a better life. Like there's something wrong with me, right? And then just having those thoughts all of a sudden, you know, unfortunately, I'm asking the people in the room that I'm doing it with if I got a problem. They're saying, no, you're fine. Don't worry. Just keep coming back, right? And but one day, a cousin of mine picked me up, Mike Baird. That's Chief
Kim.
Yeah, Chief Ken Baird. His brother picked me up and took me to a meeting that morning, and I didn't like it. I hated it. I didn't think I was ready for it, but every day I went back. Every day I went there, and it was 8:30 in the morning and 5:30 in the afternoon, and I just kept going to this meeting and miserable, you know, holding a warm seat, drinking a coffee, didn't want to share, didn't want to practice the principles, and my arms were crossed, and, you know, I was just not happy. But at the end of the day, I still kept going to this meeting, reluctantly. And every day there was this lady named Sylvia, and she was at this meeting. She always told me, keep coming back. Keep coming back every day. Yeah. She's like, Creator's got a plan for you. And I was like, I just cringed, and I was like, I don't want to hear it, Sylvia. And then I was 3 months in. And I was still living in this house that I told you for the 2 years duration, and I had nowhere to go. Every day was temptation. Every day, you know, it was there. It was in front of me. My mouth was salivating by night and couldn't wait to get out of there in the morning. But I had nowhere to go. I was restricted in the networking that I had because I burned a lot of bridges back then, just from addiction, right? Total letdown to people. And so nobody had trust and confidence in me. And that's okay, right? It takes time to build that over again. Chief Kenny Baird was at that meeting one morning. I bawled my eyes out, and I said I had nowhere to go, or, you know, either I'm going to go back to addiction or, you know, something's going to have to happen. And he was the guy that happened. He came out of that meeting, and, you know, he had 6 months prior ahead of me, and he had an empty room in his house, and he said, as long as you live here, you give me $200 worth of food every month, you help me with chores when I tell you, and you help me with the kids in the morning, get them ready for school, He said, as long as you live here, you go to 2 meetings every day. And if you have ever met Kenny Baird, he's about 285 pounds. He's a big, native-looking guy. And so you nod real loud. Yes, sir. Right? And I remember that day. It was the happiest day of my life, honestly. I walked from this house carrying a garbage bag of nothing, practically air. I had some socks, some shoes, a couple pairs of pants, and threw it over my shoulder, and I was skipping down that road. It was only 10 houses away. Right, and it completely changed my life. You don't know how close somebody's house that could change your life and just alter the direction of your future path. Right, not only my path, but I'm sure because of Ken's generosity, it has changed hundreds and hundreds of people's lives.
The ripple effect of it.
Yeah,
absolutely. What an incredible story.
Yeah, it is.
And then.
Yeah, what
and
happened?
Then, tell us more.
Yeah, where did the entrepreneurship start coming in, or what happened?
Well, my mom says I was always an entrepreneur. She said even growing up as a kid, you're always out there shoveling snow and raking leaves and cutting people's grass. And, they said right at a very young age, you figured it out. You work hard, you put yourself out there, you make money. Right. My brothers, not so much. My brothers were older, and they used to. I was doing so well in my little neighborhood business of everybody that I was servicing at different houses. They're like, my oldest brother's like, okay, I'm going to be your manager now. And my other brother's like, okay, well, I'm going to work part-time and help you, and we're going to grow the business. And then finally, my parents pulled me off to the side. They're like, look, you don't need them, right?
Yeah.
You should fire them. So I turned around, I fired them, and, carried on with my business. But with Ken, him and I became best friends. I lived with Ken for 5.5 years. And I went to 2 meetings every single day. And I started crabbing and, just took a little bit of money that I was making from everything and just how can I make $20 into 40 into 80 into 160 and so on. And was I able to repeat this? And it was just like manifesting. I'm a huge manifester, and well, it may not happen today, it may happen in a year, it may happen in 10 years, right? But it's going to happen at some point, and everything I've ever dreamed is well beyond my expectations today. I'm living a life that, I never had anything until I was 30. Didn't get a driver's license until I was 31. Had my first child at 31, and so there's this sense of this drive, like I need to catch up. I need to have this drive to catch up to, I don't know who I'm competing against. I'm competing against myself to just like prove to the world and myself that, what I can break the barriers of this, stigma around addiction and Indigenous people. And, I can do it. So I just kept moving forward.
I know family is really important to you. How has your past changed you as you are today as a father?
Well, I have 4 wonderful kids. I have a 22-year-old, 17, and a 14-year-old and a 4-year-old. And, obviously we all want our children to emulate us to some degree. And I couldn't imagine not having my kids in my life. And, I'm not an imperfect father as well. I'm sure we can all agree. We all have our daily struggles with our kids. But, my kids will never see the life that I'm sure even you guys had to live, and myself as well. And so, today, I want to do a lot better than I did yesterday, but I just don't want to have to expose them to our childhood, which, I'm not sure about you guys, but I'm sure for some wasn't as rosy.
No, and I think for a lot of our listeners, and we deal with so many, we are Indigenous ourselves and our Indigenous communities and viewers and listeners because of the residual effects of residential school and just what's happened to our people. The ripple effect is still here. It's still strong. We teach kids camps all over Canada where we still see kids that think they don't look at you in the eye because their parents were told it's disrespectful, or you don't challenge authority, or they talk very quiet and very humble and afraid to really blow their own horn, if you will, because you're afraid that your own people are going to take you down. And it's just this, we have to get through these barriers where we can really promote each other. And I think because a lot of us lived such tumultuous childhoods, we spoil our children now, right? give them so much because they must have the iPhone and they have to have the PS5. And then they're going, I never went on vacation. So now we're going to take them on vacations, and we don't want them to be bullied, and we're handling them with kid gloves, and then we're shaking them because they're not responsible. Right. And they don't appreciate money, and they don't appreciate working. And we're really setting up kids for a better future.
Yeah.
Optically, but yeah, trying to give our kids what we didn't have, and where do you find that balance?
And I think too, it's, we spend a lot of our lives, or have spent the last, 20 years on reserve, right? In different reserves across Canada. And there's still a massive disparity. It really hasn't changed. We work with the kids, we work in the schools with them, and the disparity between non-Indigenous communities and Indigenous hasn't changed a lot, I don't think, that I've seen. So it's so important that we recognize this.
Yeah.
And it's there. Yeah. So to hear this story is amazing. Yeah.
So much of what you talked about with the kids and how we, inadvertently spoil them.
We don't mean to.
Don't mean to, right? But that's the environment that we live in today, right? And so hopefully, we are building success for them as well. And I can be a bit of a hard dad. You want it, you'll earn it, right? I think they've all divvied up already what I've had, they said. But I'm the one that's like, you know what, like, you want anything from me as a dad, you're going to have to go work for it. Yes, I get the iPhones. Yes, we go on vacations. But, the business-wise of things, you're going to have to go to school. You're going to have to learn leadership programs. You're going to have to take business and economics or some form of college degree, to some degree. But then, who am I to say? I'm a grade 9 dropout, right? I never went to school. I never completed high school. And so as a father, I'm not like really academically really pounding on the kids, because we all know when you find your passion, you find your passion.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And they will shine in their passion when it does happen. So how can I help them just kind of move along until we figure that out? And so, go to school, complete the program, or at least, maintain some level of respect throughout the school, and complete high school. I would be more than ecstatic with that, right? But
and we have 4 boys, and by very nature, boys don't really like school that often.
No.
they like sports.
Yeah, that's right. They're figuring it out. So
Yeah, definitely. So after that time living with Chief Ken, when was it that you decided to start your own business, and what was it? I think I always say that there are born entrepreneurs, 100%. You'll know it if you're an entrepreneur right now that we're listening to. And then there's entrepreneurs that can find their passion and make it into a business. And this can be something that's learned as well, which is something so exciting about entrepreneurism, is you get to make your dreams come true. When did you decide to start your first company? And I know that Dean and I, in our other life, we worked with procurement, with authentic consultation, et cetera. And we're going to get into that after you start your business. Well, you talk about starting your business, because I know that you have been a big advocate for procurement and what this means when industry really has to put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, I was actually, I was doing my 3rd year carpentry with Kwantlen University, and I was working, doing rough framing and stuff like that in the construction side of the world. But I was also still fishing, and I was still crabbing. And, I just had a young daughter, Isabella, at that time. And I also bought my very first boat. I bought my very first crab boat off of Mike Baird again. And, and at that time, the engine was blowing, the leg didn't work on the boat, the deck was rotten, but you know what, I'm going to fix this thing, and I'm going to figure out how do I get this boat out on crabbing and salmon fishing for our people, and then also commercial-wise.
what size boat was it? Just to give some idea.
It was a 29-foot bow picker.
Okay.
It wasn't that big, but big enough for what we do out in the Strait of Georgia and in the river. But how do I find the money? How do I get the crab traps? And so a good friend of mine, Derek Allison, also on Blue Steel at the time, I think he still does. He approached me and he said, "Look, I'll lend you $10,000 to get the engine repaired and get a leg done. That's all he needed." He says, 6% interest rate, 2-year payment plan. If you have any issues, just let me know. We'll figure it out. Very humble. I'm like, thank you. But these gifts wouldn't have come if I didn't stay with the program and go to 2 meetings every day, just as Ken said, and follow that direction. And then there was another gentleman, Kevin at Seal Tech in Ladner. He owned crab traps. And so I walked in there and I said, Kevin, my name's Steve Stark. I know you don't know me, but, I'm hoping that we can develop a relationship and I can front 40 crab traps. He took a deep breath and he says, do you know such and such from TFN? I'm like, yes, sir, of course I do. I'm smiling real loud, nodding, yes. And then how about this person? You know this person? Oh, yeah, that's my other cousin. He's like, well, they both came here and said the same thing and never paid me. Okay. Well, then I kind of shrink in my seat and I was like, he says, what makes you different? I said, all I have is my word. Like, I don't have any money. I don't have anything to offer you other than, a promise that I will pay you back. And he looked at me and he stared for a minute and he pondered his thoughts. And then he said, you know what? There's something there. I'm going to give you a try. And again, both of these men had no obligation to help, right? And so, there's these little, having a hard time finding the right words, but there's these little gifts that come out in life.
Moments in life, maybe.
Moments in life, for sure. And I paid them both back in 6 months. I got my first 40 traps, I got the boat all done, and boom. Then I bought another boat. But where the real entrepreneur part of things come is like, how do I keep these boats busy during the off season, right? And where is there other opportunities? I see fishermen's and commercial fishermen's and other cousins of ours in the industry. Their boats are tied up most of the time. There's no other real opportunities. And so we hear the province, they're speaking big words, procurement, truth and reconciliation, that they're going to set aside 5%, 7% of government contracts. And, what does that mean? And so, I start hearing these things throughout the industry and I'm like, well, what about marine contracts? How do I get my boats doing marine doing water sampling, crabs or ooligans or estuary programs and stuff like that? First went after it, epic fail, didn't know what I was doing. But the biggest thing is why? Why am I not being successful? But it's not just asking myself why. Like, I'm very persistent. Persistent in a good way, but just asking the right questions. What can I do better? Why didn't I win that? Well, you don't have the right boat equipment, or, you didn't have no insurance, or just small little things that I think I could have overcome. But okay, then go back and bid on another job. Didn't get it. Why? Right? And so then I went to BCIT Marine Campus and did my 150 gross ton masters for ship operator. And so get some of these marine contracts, all you need is your basic SVOP and your first aid and your mid-A safety requirements. And those are just very basic. They're about 2-week course programs in total. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do a master's in ship operator so I can drive small ferry boats, right, and be on the tugs and stuff like that. Went back to school, and my first class was ship construction and stability. I was way out of my class, way out of my league. I haven't been in school and doing trigonometry and algebra that I've never seen in my life. And so obviously hot and sweaty, and I'm like, I think I should drop out. And I went home, I looked at my kids, and I'm like, I'm not dropping out. I'm going to do this, right? And I hired a private tutor, and she taught me every day after school trigonometry and algebra, and then all of a sudden my mind could just see it happening on the board. I could see the formulas, and everything's unraveling. I can see it plain as day, and then one course led to another, and next thing you know, I had my master's degree in ship operator, right? And then went after my class 1 drivers, and then started the school bus division, right? People get a good chuckle, but they see Tsawwassen Shuttles as a successful business, but they're like, how did you start it? And I was like, well, I didn't want to drive my kids to school anymore. So I opened up a school bus company. I went to Tsawwassen First Nation and advocate them to, well, we hear what the province is saying. Well, why isn't our own nation doing the same principles? We're asking, the nations are asking the government to do these things. Why are we not giving our own people these opportunities? And so just kind of like pinpointing at the heart of our own people as well, at leadership, to also make those changes from within as well. And so, it worked. I got a 10-year contract from Tsawwassen to do about 80 kids curbside pickup for 8 different schools, and then that just blossomed into Delta District's field trips for a lot of the schools, now Richmond, Surrey, elders programs, snowboarding, charity programs. Like it's endless amount of busing now for the 12 buses that I do have.
And when did this start? What year was that you got that first bus?
Well, the very first bus was in 2011. I got a little bus, and then I was working out at Deltaport, running crews back and forth for Jacob Brothers and a BA Blacktop. And I didn't know anything about busing, but I just knew that there was an opportunity through our ECDev department to potentially have Tsawwassen have a laydown spot and be able to shuttle these workers back and forth every day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, didn't really matter. But it was just done on a schedule, so it'd be 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon. Easy peasy money, right? Like this is easy stuff. And then the mills opened up, and then I was like, that's when I decided to rebrand. It used to be called Stark's Transportation. We went to Tsawwassen Mills, Tsawwassen Shuttles. Right? Unbeknownst to me, that was a gold mine for me because the amount of internet searches I get because of Tsawwassen Mills looking for shuttles.
Oh yeah,
I'm at the top of the page.
Yeah.
No, and it's you know what? It's so smart, and for when we teach business classes to really think about that when you're thinking of a name of your company, where the Google search is going to come up at the top of it, whether it's Seashelt or Tsawwassen or Squamish or whatever it is. There's a lot of traffic on those. So how brilliant!
Yeah. And then you were competing with Tony Stark, of course.
Yeah, of course. You are a bit of an Iron Man, though. There is a synergy here.
Honestly, it was just I have a mind that sees opportunities, and I don't know how to say it other than maybe connect it back to trauma. Like we see the world a bit different. And so you can identify where there's gaps in the system. You can identify people and opportunities, and started the street sweeping company. I watched the street sweeping company go round and round at Tsawwassen First Nation, and he was there 5 days a week, and I was like, why can't I do that, right? So I just went to all the developers down at TFN, and I was like, hey, if I buy a sweeper and match the rates, and would you consider giving me a try? And they like, yes, right? Make those personable relationships, like go in, just be humble, like lay it out on the table, but also encourage them to make space. Right? People didn't want to make space. So it's like, can you just give me a shot? Right? That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for everything else throughout Greater Vancouver. Can you just help me on this nation land? And they all said yes. I went into the ECDev department, and there was a gentleman named Chris Hartman at that time. And I told Chris what my idea was. I said, look, I want to open up a street sweeping company. He's like, sit down, Steve. I sit down. He's like, why not? He's like, I suggest maybe you go work for a street sweeping company first. Go work for one, figure out how it operates for at least a year, and know all the ins and outs, and then come back, and then we'll talk about financing you for a street sweeper. I said, Chris, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I don't need to understand how to run it to know how to invest into it and see an opportunity. Right? I see it different.
Yeah, it's like the who, not how. You know how to run the business. You're going to find somebody. You're going to find the who to operate the street sweeper while you run the business opportunities of it.
That's right.
That's funny that as an ECDev officer myself, if somebody came in and they wanted to open a coffee shop as an entrepreneur, I would say, go work in a coffee shop. But that's a bit extreme. Sorry, Chris, but that's a bit extreme. Yeah.
But it gave me the fire. Like these little things give you and ignite you to then move forward and be like, you know what? And within a year, I went out and bought a street sweeper and did it on my own. And then now we got half a dozen sweepers. We service all of Greater Vancouver. We work with every major construction company, small, medium, large. We're on major projects, small projects. Like Tsawwassen Shuttles now is like at the top of the procurement of everywhere we go. Like the endless amount of phone calls that I get and emails, not only in the street sweeping, but in the water trucking division, now the tow trucking, the marine company just exploded, and the buses have just taken off. And now all of a sudden, it's like, well, how do we leverage relationships to get not opportunities for me, but opportunities for Indigenous people to show like, hey, we have a place in this environment today. We are the new frontiers of workers. We are going to make a change. We are going to just take back what is rightfully ours. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you know, we as Indigenous people have to work 10 times harder than anybody else right now. We have a tremendous amount of catching up. Our Indigenous people hold probably the most valuable land in all of BC now, because everything else is developed. And especially in Greater Vancouver, there's this huge gap between the Indigenous stakeholders and developers that have been here for the last 200 years already developing.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we catch up?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is, how did you access that capital then, right? Did you have the support of the nation behind you, right? There's all these financial, tools that we can start using now, but you're right, we're still not there.
No, and having access to capital 10 years ago is a lot different than receiving access to capital now.
Oh, yeah.
Because the conventional banks, like the credit unions, like the Van Cities, and that are understanding the way the Talahouts and NACAs that are allowing access to capital where it's more conventional and more cultural on our part, and having the resources to repair our credit and to, especially with Talahout, which is one of our, Brian Gillespie, he was so great with me and so many businesses. And he's just like, what happened? Right? Like, what happened for this, stuff happens. You don't pay cell phone bills. Your kids rack up your cell phone bills. And as Indigenous people, our relationship money is so disconnected from the way that conventional colonial banking is done right now, right? It's, we're just so disconnected with our relationship with money, and how do we repair it, and how do we manage wealth? The great Crystal Smith, Chief Crystal Smith, that's my favorite thing that she said, like, we're tired of managing poverty. How do we learn how to manage wealth appropriately and soundly? And I think everything, I love how positive you are, because no matter what you've been through, you always seem to turn it around. And as many Indigenous businesses give opportunities to others, and how do we provide solutions for problems, not just in our own community, but conventionally for industry, from getting from A to B, from providing a workforce, which is now retiring right now. How do we educate? How do we elevate our members or an Indigenous people to really have a spot at this? And you've really provided them that opportunity for sure. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about the Bears Lair, because that's where, we've met at different conferences, Dean, yourself and I, at different conferences, knowing your industry opportunity. But how was it with the Bears Lair, with meeting all of the different entrepreneurs and being on a TV show?
Well, there are so many things to experience and learn from everybody there. I just want to honor the great program that you guys have put on. I know it's your second year, and I could just imagine the struggles that you guys have gone through in this growth period as well. And and I know I said it prior to us going online, but just the ripple effect of the lives that I'm sure that you guys have touched throughout the viewers looking through to the people on the show to the cast that works on it. Like, there's just a huge undertaking that really gets this giant engine moving over. And I don't think a lot of people may not appreciate or don't understand all the amount of work and the sleepless nights I'm sure that you guys have gone through just to get that off. And so to be a part of the program and to be one of the selectees to be on it. Win or lose, it was still it was a winning experience. And you know, I knew the moment that I knew about the clean water, I knew it. I knew that he was going to win. I can just sense it. Great product and the integral part of what he was trying to do, and all of that, and the support. And it was just like, to me, I would invest into it, right? Like as an entrepreneur, like I want to invest into everybody, but you see these really special things that really pop up once in a while, and you know, they're shining beacons. And so, you know, to be on the show and to be mentored and to be a mentee as well. You know, I've kept in contact with some of these people, and I've seen them over in NACA in Ottawa as well. I've seen them at CCABs and different events, and so it's like, now all of a sudden you got more friends, right?
No.
More support.
Yep.
And how do we support them as well in their growth period? And so, you know, and even with you guys, like, you know, it's a small industry. There's not many of us occupying the space right now. And so how do we make sure we fill that space while our people have the capacity to get in there? And, you know, unfortunately, we're going to have to lift the building up for a while. But, you know, there's more and more Indigenous people flooding in with businesses and opportunities, and there's more capital funds and, you know, TAC. You talked about Brian Gillespie, you talked about Van City, all huge supporters over the last 20 years. And so, you know, I really look forward to being more successful in seeing what the Bears Lair has to do next for you guys. And so, and, you know, as a business like myself, how can I help support and, you know, bring more awareness to the change that's happening, not only for you guys, but for us, but for, like, it's a ripple effect. And I don't think a lot of people understand that BC is a very unique province in its Indigenous relations. And so, you know, it's unique to us because of the Queen and all the other treaties throughout Canada. But, you know, I believe that BC is going to be the last real undeveloped frontiers of the world because of the land claim that we hold.
Oh, and I thank you for that. And I think that
Thank you.
the one thing that you mentioned is over and over is the ripple effect. And I think I always say 1 equals 12. So if you impact one person's life, and I think this because when we teach kids camps all over Canada, we teach up to 30 kids per cohort, and we go to all different communities. But if you even influence one child, it impacts 12 people. It impacts their siblings, their parents, their cousins, their community, and that confidence, that social confidence that is gained with that opportunity ripple affects others. And if you're doing 30 kids and 1 equals 12, then we've got 360 kids that are been influenced just by if everyone is touched with something. And I think when you talk about somebody taking an opportunity with you and taking a chance on you, you are as good as your word. Do what you say you're going to do. You know, under promise and over deliver. And there's so many things that we could teach people, but I think you are as good as your word. And when people give you an opportunity and trust in you, it just makes all the difference in the world. And you're providing so many opportunities and so much social impact with your own people. And I can't even imagine, because when we're adults, 1 will probably equal 24 if you influence and you impact that people, and you're supporting so many families and you're giving so many people an authentic lens as to who we are in people, especially in the industry and being the leader that you are. So thank you so much for coming on our program today. And any last words for any advice for any entrepreneurs or industry leaders that are listening to us today?
You know, I've always said, and thank you for reminding me, but I always say persistence overcomes resistance. And for Indigenous people, we have a tall order to fill. And you know, every time I go into a meeting with a new company, I always say space. You know, humbly, can you carve out a little bit of space? Can government carve out a little bit of space? Why does it have to be a $2 million contract, right, and unachievable for a first-time business? Could it not be 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, right? Why do I have to take on all of a whole company's street sweeping, right? Or water trucking. Why couldn't it be like, can I just work in this geographical area, right? And so make it achievable for businesses to grow, right? Not set them up for failure as well.
That's
right?
awesome. Yep.
So.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Great.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, so good to see you, Steve.
Thank
An
you.
amazing story, an amazing accomplishment, where you grew up, who you are now, and where you're going. And what can we expect next from you?
No, I knew you were going to ask me that. As a good entrepreneur, you never tell everybody what you're doing. You got to stay one step ahead. I really do. Right now, I'm having a really good time where I'm at. I'm meeting a ton of people in the political world and business and Indigenous communities. And, I really feel like there's a lot to change by just sitting in the pocket right now and enjoying it and seeing how can I help one person get to the next, or how can I bridge relationships between communities or bridge relationships between governments and stuff like that. And so, I'm working on, I'm working on a daycare franchise right now, looking to change in that sector, just always evolving and looking for opportunities to invest. But it's not about, it has nothing to do with any monetary value. It's just like, what's the next challenge?
Yeah.
Right? Master one, move on to the next. Mm-hmm. Right? And I couldn't do that without the support of my staff and the people that work with me and the friends and family that continue to keep supporting me. So I am literally just a conduit here as well. So all that recognition is backed by thousands of people kind of pushing me forward.
Excellent. And how do people get a hold of you, Steve?
Well, you can get a hold of me through TsawwassenShuttles.com or LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. And, I'm very open about sharing my story and contact information. I feel like it's always beneficial to just I got no problem sharing my number, emails, and phone calls and text messages or whatever is the form of communicating with people. But I'm an open book. And I think what the important thing that you also mentioned is entrepreneurness is something that is inside you, right? And so I enjoy mentoring people and spending time, but that drive really has got to come from that individual, right? And I've seen a few people with it, and and hope that can carry on that success.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Well, you're going to continue growing. We know that. Yeah.
Persistent over resistant. So I'm going to remember that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us today, Steve. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Lair. Please follow us, download this episode, and follow us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok.